The Monster is Real by FishermanTales. Of all the kids who lay awake at night in fear of the monster lurking underneath their bed, I might be the only one to ever found theirs to be real. It began 20 years ago, when I heard something go bump in the night. Now, granted, a lot of things can go bump in the night, only about half of them are actually scary. But this particular bump came from under my bed. I was just a boy then, only 10, and when I heard that bump but a mere hour after having watched Nightmare on Elm Street, I knew it could be none other than Freddy Krueger himself. "Hello?" My prepubescent voice quivered, high-pitched and shaky, like a songbird on ice. There was, of course, no response. My bedroom door was open as always. I was far too fearful to seal myself away in the dark, and I briefly considered making a run for it. But Krueger has those bladed fingers, you know? I was no athlete. My long jump was short and my short jump was inevitable, so the likelihood of him hacking into my Achilles upon landing seemed a strong one. So what did that leave? I could holler for my parents, or at least one of them would certainly have to come check in on me. It posed the risk that they too would be murdered by Freddy Krueger, or they'd find nothing and think me just a silly little boy, and there was no denying that I in fact was a very silly little boy. But this was no laughing matter. The other option, and it ultimately ended up being the one I chose, was to cower beneath the covers atop my bed, praying that Freddy would treat my Ninja Turtles comforter as some sort of impenetrable fortress. So I ducked inside and hid, intending to ride it out until sunrise, when all of a sudden, I heard another bump. And not just heard it, but felt it as well. The vibration of something sizable bumping beneath my bed. This was confirmation of a monster, as my only pet was a hamster, my sister was a baby, my parents weren't nearly mischievous enough to pull such a prank. In response to the bump, I squealed. The short squeal quickly suppressed, like a chirp of air released from a balloon. I covered my mouth with my hand and held my breath, and while I didn't break into tears just then, there was no denying I was in fear for my life, which my rapidly pounding heart made abundantly clear. I peeked from my covers and stole another glance at my open doorway, reconsidering the first option. But that thought quickly dissipated as the door suddenly and without any visible assistance slammed shut. Option B went into effect. "Help!" I screamed, over and over, until my door flung open and my parents came rushing in, flicking on my lights in the process. "Jacob, what's wrong?" my mom said, first to my bedside. I searched for words, stumbled over the ones I found, and stuttered as they left my mouth. "Monster," I said, "under my bed." Mom and Dad exchanged glances with one another as if to say, "This nonsense again?" But this time my complaint came with what looked to be shell shock, and although my parents did not believe in monsters, and certainly not the kind who hide under beds, they weren't going to leave my room without first putting my mind at ease. So, my dad knelt and looked beneath my bed. To my surprise, stood back up fully intact. "No monsters down there," he said. "But Freddy Krueger can blend in and kill me in my dreams." Mom looked at Dad and said, "I told you not to let him watch that movie." "But it's almost Halloween," Dad argued. "He's only 10. I watched horror movies when I was his age. I never got scared." Mom sighed. "That's because you're a sociopath, Jem." "I'm not." Mom ignored him and dabbed my eyes away with the edge of my comforter. "Sorry, sweetie. Your dad shouldn't have let you watch that movie." "But it's just a movie. It's not real." "But what if it is?" I said. "It's not. I promise." "But what about the thing that was bumping against my bed, or my door closing?" "Our mind can play all sorts of tricks on us when we're scared. Your bed probably pops and shifts all the time without you noticing. The springs do that sometimes, and you don't know how many times I've had to open your door in the morning because it's shut while you were sleeping. Dad needs to fix that." Dad smiled and patted my leg. "Yeah, bud, it's something wrong with the door, that's all. How about we prop it open with something tonight?" Dad turned around and grabbed a chair from the corner of my room and placed it against the door. "How's that?" "Good, I guess," I said. "Yeah," Mom said, then fluffed my pillows and tucked me in. "Now, get some sleep. And don't you worry about monsters. they aren't real. Promise? Promise. She kissed me on the forehead as she walked out the door and flicked the lights off. I was once again alone in the eerie darkness of my room, but with a newfound armor of parental reassurance. My parents said monsters weren't real, and back in those days, my parents might as well have been omniscient. But I soon learned that not to be the case when, as I lay in my bed, confident and comfortable, I heard a new noise. The sound of wooden chair legs sliding across a wooden floor. Not being pushed into the hallway by a heavy door would mean that sound was moving away from me. But this was coming toward me. I opened my eyes and sure enough, the chair was sliding into my room and away from the door. Then about 3 feet from me, it stopped and the door remained open. "Hello?" I said. Then, the door shut and the room became even darker, and before I could scream, a heavy kick against the bottom of my bed launched me into the air and sent me crashing onto the floor. I'd landed hard on my side, but kids are pretty durable, and I was no exception. I was startled and a bit sore, but mostly unscathed. I had landed in such a way that I was facing beneath my bed, peering straight into the monster's lair. And that's when I saw it. It goes without saying that despite my fears that night, Freddy Krueger is in fact nothing more than a fictional character. But I did not see Freddy Krueger. What I saw as I lay there on my floor, peering into the dark void beneath my bed, were 2 large red eyes peering right back at me. And beneath those eyes was a large white toothy grin. The monster did not move. It just sat there, smiling and breathing. Soon, those breaths began to pulsate, and gradually it became a low hissing snicker. The monster was laughing, and I started screaming, "Help!" I scurried across the floor and yanked the door open, and bounded down the hallway to my parents. Never again did I sleep in that room, much to my parents' dismay. I spent far too many nights nestled in bed with Mum and Dad. When I was finally brave enough to leave their room, I moved in with my baby sister in her room, desperately pleading with my parents not to then move her into my old room. The monster was real, I told them. Years went by and I would not budge. I even got rid of the bed and bought one that was flush with the floor, but it wasn't enough to get me to move back in. Eventually, my parents did the only thing they felt they could. They sold the house. Although they didn't believe in the monster, they couldn't convince me to think the same. And even today, my parents will talk about the time they had to sell their house because of my unrelenting insistence that there was a monster under my bed. They can laugh at it now, maybe over a couple of drinks while in the company of friends, but that's because the idea of a monster under a bed is so silly to them. Most would agree, but now, at 30 years old, if anyone mentions my childhood fear of the thing that lurked beneath my bed, I still do not hesitate to tell them the truth. The monster is real.